Star Citizen has pulled in over $800 million in crowdfunding. $800 million. And they're still calling it an alpha game. Some ships cost $1,000 or more. Players literally pay to test an unfinished product. And yet, millions of people keep throwing money at it like there's no tomorrow. It sounds completely insane until you dig deeper into what's actually happening here. What we're seeing is the traditional game development model completely flipped upside down. At first glance, it looks like the biggest gaming scam in history. But when you look closer, it's actually a massive experiment in alternative development. I know a guy who dropped just $45 and ended up spending months in the alpha. We'll use his experience as a real-world case study later on. The whole thing raises so many questions. Why would anyone spend thousands on digital spaceships that don't fully work yet? What keeps people coming back to an unfinished game? Is this really just a brilliant scam, or are we watching something revolutionary unfold? Let's follow the money and see where that massive pile of cash actually went. Most AAA games cost hundreds of millions to make these days. Your God of Wars, your Cyberpunks. But Star Citizen sitting at $800 million in crowdfunding alone is what makes everyone's jaw drop. We're talking about $800 million and counting, coming directly from players who've decided to back this project. Here's what most people miss, though. They're not actually making one game. They're making two massive games simultaneously. Star Citizen is developing a single-player cinematic campaign called Squadron 42, alongside this enormous, persistent universe. Squadron 42 is basically this epic space opera where you play as a pilot in the UEE Navy fighting these aliens called the Vandul. They've got Gary Oldman, Mark Hamill, Gillian Anderson, serious Hollywood talent, all doing full motion capture performances. We're talking a complete cinematic story, scripted missions, the whole 9 yards. It's supposed to be around 20 hours of single-player content that essentially proves all their fancy tech works in a controlled environment. But the persistent universe? That's where things get absolutely wild. This isn't like your typical MMO where you load into instances with maybe 100 people tops. They're trying to build server technology that can handle thousands of players occupying the same space simultaneously. You can actually walk around inside your spaceship while flying through deep space. Other players can board your vessel. You can get out and do EVA repairs, floating in the void while your friend keeps piloting. The level of simulation they're aiming for is frankly ridiculous. Most of that $800 million went into building server technology that no other game studio even attempts to touch. They had to create this thing called server meshing, which basically lets many servers work together so the world feels completely seamless as players move between planets or zones. When you fly from one planet to another, you're actually moving between different physical servers without loading screens or disconnects. Nobody else is doing this at this scale. Think about how EA or Activision fund their games. They use their own money, build everything in secret behind closed doors, then sell you the finished product for $60. You get what you get. No input during development, no early access, just marketing hype until release day. Star Citizen completely flipped this model. Players fund the development directly and get access during the entire process. You're not buying a game in the traditional sense. You're backing a project. Your money literally pays the salaries while developers build features in real time. You can log in and test new systems as soon as they come online. When they add a new planet or ship or gameplay mechanic, backers get to try it immediately, not years later when everything's done. But here's the thing that keeps everyone arguing in circles. Does this model actually work? Or does it just create this endless development cycle that never reaches the finish line? Traditional publishers set hard deadlines because they need return on investment. Without that pressure, developers can theoretically keep adding features forever. Some call it scope creep. The vision keeps expanding because there's always more money coming in from backers who want new stuff. On one hand, you get this incredible ambition, features that would never make it into a traditional game because they're too risky or expensive for a publisher to greenlight. On the other hand, you get development that's been dragging on for over a decade with no firm release date in sight. Some backers have literally grown up waiting for this game. The research shows that the majority of Cloud Imperium's development staff have been working on Squadron 42, leaving the persistent universe with a smaller team than you might expect. They've built custom game engines, motion capture facilities, and server infrastructure completely from scratch. Most of that wouldn't exist without crowdfunding because no traditional publisher would risk this much money on unproven technology. The $800 million isn't just game development money, it's funding an entirely new way to make games. Instead of publishers deciding what gets made, players vote with their wallets during actual development. Instead of waiting years for a finished product with no visibility, you get incremental updates and direct feedback loops between developers and players throughout the process. This fundraising model buys crazy ambition, but it also completely removes the usual ship or fail deadline that keeps traditional games on track. That tension between unlimited ambition and no hard deadline is the real reason people call it a scam. But before we can test that claim properly, you need to know what you actually get when you jump in right now.
Here's the thing nobody talks about enough. You can jump in right now for the price of a regular game.
Everyone focuses on those insane $1,000 ship packages that make headlines, but the base experience costs just $45. That's the same as picking up any new release on Steam. The real question is whether that $45 gets you an actual game or just an expensive tech demo with a fancy screenshot mode. Let me walk you through what you actually get for your money. I paid $45 and got a Drake Cutter as my starter ship. Nothing fancy, it's basically the space equivalent of a Toyota Corolla, but it flies and it's yours to keep. You get access to the Stanton star system, which has 4 planets, dozens of moons, and multiple, massive space stations. Each planet has cities, outposts, and landing zones you can explore on foot. We're talking about areas so vast, they could be entire game worlds in other titles. The basic gameplay loop isn't complicated. You wake up in your HAB unit, maybe grab a quick burrito from the Galleria, then call your ship from the terminal. Last night, I claimed an A1 Spirit for a bombing run on Aberdeen. You quantum travel between planets, handle your mission objectives, and sometimes your ship explodes and you respawn back at the station. That's Star Citizen in a nutshell. The gameplay loops are definitely there, even if they're not all fully fleshed out. Cargo hauling means buying goods at one location and selling them somewhere else for profit. Basic space trucking 101. Mining works with either handheld tools or ship-mounted equipment. You find ore deposits, extract them carefully, then sell the materials. Bounty hunting puts you against AI pirates or other players who've racked up crime stats. Combat missions send you after specific targets for money and reputation. Salvage lets you strip parts and materials from wrecked ships. Exploration is a huge part of the experience. New cave systems, derelict ships, and hidden locations get added with each major patch. You can find rare materials, lost cargo caches, or just incredible screenshot opportunities. The scale is genuinely mind-boggling. You can spend hours just flying between planets and moons, checking out different biomes and weather systems. PvP combat happens organically throughout the game world. Other players can attack you, steal your cargo, or work together with you on missions. There's no separate PvP mode or instancing. Everything happens in the same shared universe. Your reputation with different factions affects what missions you can take and how NPCs treat you across the system. Here's the thing that truly sets it apart from other games, though. Persistence. Your ship, your money, your reputation, your mission progress, all of it carries over between play sessions. When you log off, your character physically stays in the universe. Other players might see your ship parked at a station. If you leave cargo boxes somewhere on a moon, they'll still be there when you come back hours later. That level of persistence just doesn't exist in other space games. You can absolutely earn bigger ships without spending extra real money. Complete enough bounty missions and you'll have cash for a better fighter. Do cargo runs for a while and you can buy a dedicated hauler. Players also steal ships from each other or find abandoned ones floating in space. I've seen people flying around in ships worth hundreds of dollars that they got for free through gameplay rather than spending a dime. But let's be real about the problems too. This is an alpha build, in every sense of the word. Bugs are frequent, and patches can reset things you've worked for. Some nights, you'll find yourself hitting Alt F4 after just a few minutes because something broke in a mission. You might lose an entire cargo hold full of expensive goods to a random server crash. Your ship might spontaneously explode for absolutely no reason. Sometimes, missions break halfway through, and you can't complete them. The game warns you it's an alpha build before you buy it, and it absolutely feels like one. Performance varies wildly, depending on your hardware setup. You'll want a decent gaming rig. Busy areas can absolutely tank even mid-range systems. Loading into heavily populated zones can take forever if you're running on older hardware, or without an SSD. Some systems feel incomplete or clearly placeholder. The medical gameplay is pretty basic. Ship salvaging exists, but it's limited. Base building got pushed back to future updates. You're essentially playing with systems that work, but definitely aren't finished yet. But here's what genuinely surprised me. Even with all the alpha jank, that $45 package delivers more actual content than many finished games. The flight model feels fantastic when it's working properly. The graphics are stunning when they're not bugging out. Walking around inside your ship while flying through space never gets old. The attention to detail in cities and stations is genuinely impressive. You're getting access to something that simply doesn't exist anywhere else. No other game lets you seamlessly transition from first-person shooting to spaceship combat to planetary exploration in one persistent world. The technology they've built actually works, even if it's not polished yet and crashes more than it should. The real controversy isn't whether 45 gets you enough content. It absolutely does. The controversy is what happens when some players decide that 45 isn't nearly enough to show their support. Some players have spent thousands, even tens of thousands gets discussed openly across the community, and those big spenders effectively bankroll a huge chunk of ongoing development. The spending gets so astronomical that there are special recognition levels for people who invest heavily in the project. These are the whales, and they're basically funding the entire project for everyone else at this point. This creates this massive, uncomfortable gap between regular players and these big spenders that looks like pay to win on steroids from the outside. When you're flying around in your $45 starter ship and someone zooms past in a vessel that cost more than your actual real-life car, it feels deeply unfair. The optics are terrible. It looks exactly like rich players buying their way to victory while everyone else gets left in the dust. But here's the thing that complicates the narrative. Most of these expensive ships are specialized tools, not combat advantages. That super expensive mining ship isn't going to help you win PvP fights against someone in a basic fighter. Industrial ships are designed for specific gameplay loops, not for fighting other players. Same goes for dedicated cargo haulers or medical ships. Let me give you a real example I saw last week. Expensive gunships sound terrifying on paper, right? Multiple turrets, heavy armor, looks like they could wreck anything in their path. But in practice, they need multiple human crew members to operate effectively. One player in a basic fighter can literally fly circles around them because those big ships can't hit what they can't track. Skill beats money almost every time in actual combat. I've watched expensive ships get absolutely destroyed by cheaper, better piloted vessels more times than I can count. A well-flown starter ship in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing can take down vessels worth 10 times more. The combat system rewards positioning, aiming, and tactics over raw firepower. Plus, when these expensive ships explode, the owners have to pay insurance claims and wait for replacements. Meanwhile, the guy in the starter ship just claims his free replacement and keeps going. The real advantage these whales are buying isn't combat power, it's convenience. They're paying to skip grinding and jump straight to their preferred gameplay style. Want to do large-scale mining operations? Buy the industrial ship instead of working your way up through smaller vessels. Want to run a medical rescue service? Get the specialized hospital ship and start immediately. It's essentially paying for a boost to endgame content. Think about it this way. Some people have way more money than time. They'd rather spend hundreds to get the ship they want than grind for weeks to earn it in-game. For them, it's a perfectly reasonable trade-off. They're adults with jobs and families and limited gaming hours who want to experience specific gameplay without the time investment.
But here's the sustainability problem nobody's solving. This model works now because the current player base accepts these prices. Most backers are older gamers with disposable income who grew up with expensive hobbies. But critics rightly point out the model may not scale to mainstream audiences. This pricing structure becomes a massive barrier to entry for normal gamers. Imagine trying to market this game to regular players who think $20 for a skin is expensive. How do you explain that there are ships and packages priced in the hundreds to thousands of dollars? The average gamer sees those prices and immediately assumes it's pay-to-win nonsense. They don't understand the complexity behind the design. The whales also create these weird social dynamics in-game. Some players treat them like celebrities because they own rare ships. Others resent them for having advantages through spending. It splits the community in ways that traditional games simply don't have to deal with. Cloud Imperium keeps adding more expensive ships because whales keep buying them. Every concept sale brings in millions of dollars. The demand clearly exists, so the company keeps feeding it with new designs and limited-time offers. From the outside looking in, this whale spending looks completely insane and predatory. But when you understand what these players are actually buying, it functions more like convenience purchases than unfair advantages. They're not buying wins. They're buying access to specific gameplay experiences without the time investment. So are whales buying unfair advantage, or are they funding everyone else's game? The answer gets clear when you compare Star Citizen to what's actually available to play right now. Let's be brutally honest for a second. If you want a polished space game right now, there are much better options out there. No Man's Sky just dropped the Voyagers update and it added ship interiors, EVA, multi-crew Corvette support, and custom ship modules. You can walk around inside your ship while flying through space just like Star Citizen has been promising for years. The difference is it actually works reliably without crashing every 30 minutes. This puts Star Citizen in this really awkward position. Why would anyone deal with alpha bugs and server crashes when you can get similar gameplay that's stable and finished? No Man's Sky lets you group up with friends, crew ships together, and do missions across planets and space, all without losing your progress to random disconnects or patch wipes. The Voyagers update basically delivers everything Star Citizen fans have been waiting for. Custom shipbuilding with hundreds of modules you can salvage or trade. Ship interiors you can decorate however you want. EVA gameplay, where you float around in space doing repairs. Groups of up to 4 players can crew the same ship and work together on different objectives.
But here's where it gets complicated and interesting. No Man's Sky offers stability and finished features, but it's still fundamentally a different game than what Star Citizen is trying to build. No Man's Sky is more session-driven and instanced. When you play, you're in instances with just your friends or maybe a handful of other players. Everything essentially resets when you leave. Your base might disappear if another player visits the planet while you're offline. Other players' actions don't really affect your world in any permanent way. Star Citizen aims at something completely different, a shared, persistent world where other players' actions can permanently affect the environment. That cargo you left at a space station will still be there tomorrow. The reputation you built with different factions carries forward. When someone blows up a space station or mines out an asteroid field, it affects everyone in that server. The scale is completely different. No Man's Sky instances everything to keep it stable. You might see the same planet, but you're not really sharing it with hundreds of other players all doing their own thing simultaneously. Star Citizen tries to put everyone in the same persistent world, where actions have consequences that ripple through the entire economy. The trade-offs are painfully obvious. No Man's Sky gives you polish and reliability. You can play for hours without crashes or game-breaking bugs. Updates add content instead of breaking existing features. It respects your time investment and doesn't waste it. Star Citizen gives you ambition and scale, but you're basically paying to be a QA tester half the time. There are signs that Cloud Imperium is leaning heavily into aesthetics and player expression right now. New ships, cosmetics, event rewards, which some content creators have started calling a vanity phase. That shift helps drive engagement and monetization, but can feel really weird while core systems remain unfinished and buggy. So should you play Star Citizen now, or just wait for it to match No Man's Sky's stability? I think it depends entirely on what you're looking for. If you want a chill space game you can play with specific friends without dealing with drama or technical problems, No Man's Sky is the objectively better choice right now. You get ship interiors, multiplayer, base building, all that good stuff in a package that actually works consistently. But if you want to experience something that genuinely doesn't exist anywhere else, Star Citizen still offers things No Man's Sky can't match. The graphics are incredible when they work properly. The flight model feels more realistic and engaging. The social interactions with other players create emergent gameplay you can't get in smaller instances. Walking through a busy space station filled with real players doing their own missions hits completely different than exploring with just your friend group. No Man's Sky proves that polished space games with these features are absolutely possible in 2024. Hello Games keeps adding features while maintaining stability because they control their own engine and development process. They're not trying to reinvent online gaming from scratch like Cloud Imperium seems determined to do. The Voyager's update essentially sets new expectations for what space games should deliver. Ship interiors, seamless multiplayer, EVA gameplay, this stuff should just work by now. Star Citizen can't keep using alpha status as an excuse forever when competitors are shipping these features in finished, stable products. But Star Citizen isn't trying to be a direct replacement for No Man's Sky either. The persistent universe concept, if they can actually pull it off, could fundamentally change how we think about online gaming spaces. We just don't know if they can actually deliver on that promise yet after all these years. Which would you rather play this weekend? A polished Voyager session with friends where everything works as intended, or a messy, large-scale night in the persistent universe where anything could happen? The answer might depend on whether Cloud Imperium can finally deliver something concrete after all this time. Cloud Imperium has clearly prioritized Squadron 42 development, and if it finally ships as a polished, single-player product, it could free up enormous dev resources and materially change how the persistent universe progresses. We've been talking about the persistent universe and all its problems, but Squadron 42 is the single-player campaign that's been cooking alongside the MMO this entire time. It's basically the make-or-break moment for Star Citizen as a project. If Squadron 42 launches and actually delivers what they promised, it validates the entire development model overnight. All those years of delays, all that money, all the criticism. It suddenly makes sense if they can ship a polished, single-player experience with Hollywood actors and cutting-edge tech. But if it fails, or gets delayed again, the scam accusations get substantially harder to dismiss.
At some point, you have to deliver something finished to maintain credibility. Here's what most people don't realize. Squadron 42's completion would free up massive development resources for the persistent universe. Right now, most of Cloud Imperium's team is working on the single-player campaign. The persistent universe is running on what they internally call a skeleton crew. Once Squadron 42 ships, all those developers can focus entirely on fixing and expanding the MMO side of things.
Squadron 42 serves as the proof of concept for all the technology powering the MMO. The same engine, the same graphics tech, the same physics systems. If they can make it work smoothly in a controlled single-player environment, that proves the underlying tech is actually solid. Even if Squadron 42 ships in a polished state, the persistent universe still needs specific server and network engineering work. It's not an automatic fix, but shipping Squadron 42 would be a massive vote of confidence. The timeline pressure is painfully real at this point. This project desperately needs to show a finished product to maintain any credibility with the wider gaming audience. We're over a decade into development now. The gaming industry has moved forward significantly. Other space games have launched and succeeded in the meantime. At some point, potential becomes promises, becomes lies if you never ship anything complete. Squadron 42 was supposed to launch years ago. They've missed multiple release windows. Each delay makes the final product need to be even better to justify the extended wait. The expectations keep growing because the development time keeps growing. It's not enough to just be good anymore. It has to be mind-blowing to justify all this time. What Squadron 42's success or failure means for the persistent universe's future cannot be overstated. Success means more funding, more developers, and proof that their ambitious vision can actually work in practice. Failure means the project loses credibility and might struggle to maintain funding levels long-term. Backers might stop buying new ships if they think the whole thing is falling apart. Should new players wait until Squadron 42 releases before jumping into Star Citizen? I honestly think so. The single-player campaign should give you a complete, polished experience that shows what the technology can do when it's working as intended. If you play that and love it, then dealing with the alpha jank in the persistent universe makes more sense. If you're just curious and want to explore now, you can try the $45 starter pack for a low-cost look behind the development curtain. But here's the thing. We don't actually know when Squadron 42 will launch. They've stopped giving firm dates because they kept missing them. The waiting game gets old after a while, especially for backers who've been around since the beginning. The success of Squadron 42 also depends entirely on what success even means at this point. Does it need to be the best space sim ever made? Does it just need to work without major bugs? Does it need to justify 10 years of development and hundreds of millions in funding? The bar keeps moving higher with every passing year. Squadron 42 represents the pivotal moment that determines whether Star Citizen's development model actually works, or if it's just an elaborate way to keep taking money without shipping products. A successful single-player launch proves they can finish things when it counts. It shows the technology actually works. It validates the entire approach. But if Squadron 42 launches and it's mediocre or buggy or doesn't live up to the massive hype, then what? All those arguments about innovative development and cutting-edge tech fall apart if the final product is just okay. The persistent universe becomes even harder to defend as a concept. That brings us back to the original question everyone keeps asking about this whole project. So, is Star Citizen a scam? I don't think it's a simple scam in the traditional sense, but rather an experimental development model with very real risks attached. Traditional publishers don't let you play their games while they're being made, for good reason. Star Citizen does, and that creates both problems and opportunities. Here's my honest recommendation after spending time with it. If you want a polished space experience right now that works reliably, go with No Man's Sky. If you're curious about the technology and persistence and can tolerate serious alpha jank, 45 gets you in to poke around and see what all the fuss is about. Many players say they've gotten way more than 45 worth of entertainment out of it, though others hit alpha frustration nights where they Alt F4 after an hour of bugs and crashes. You're not buying a finished game here. You're buying access to probably the most ambitious game development experiment ever attempted. Some nights, you'll lose cargo to random bugs and want to throw your controller. Other nights, you'll have these incredible moments that simply don't exist in any other game out there. Are you waiting for Squadron 42 to finally drop before jumping in? Or are you willing to dive into the alpha now for $45? The game's not going anywhere, so there's no rush to decide. Sometimes the most interesting gaming experiences aren't the most polished ones.